Good morning and welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. Today we will be discussing Black mental health as it pertains to Black History Month, which is this month, the month of February. Joining me today are Sista Oloruntoyin from the Black Community Coalition and Pastor Joseph Graham Jr. of Faith and Wellness Leader. Welcome, Sister, and welcome, Pastor Joseph.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Greetings. Good to see you.
At this moment, I'm going to ask Sister to introduce herself, tell us a bit more about yourself and the work that you're doing with the Black Community Coalition.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this invitation. Yes, like you said, I'm a founding member of the Black Community Coalition for Justice and Self-Defense based here in Germany, in Hamburg to be particular. And actually, this is an organization which was formed after the unfortunate killings of some Black people here in Germany. As you know, there is the history. It's not only here in Germany, but it's unfortunately global that Black lives um, do not have the value or are not given the value that they deserve. So the Black Community Coalition and Justice for Justice and Self-Defense works on two levels. One level is what we say justice. That means we respond whenever there's an injustice, whenever there's a racial killing, whenever there is an attack, a violence, which is often also doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It's also systemic. It's structural. Here, for example, you have children being separated from their families. You have cases of asylum seekers, refugees from conflict zones in Africa not being given the right to stay here. You have people of African descent not having access to health care. You have children who are raised here, born here, but still have a sense of not belonging because their histories are not um, given any attention in the school curricula. Although Germany has a history of genocide, of a racist, violent past, they do not see themselves. They are not represented. And despite being born here, despite being raised here, they are still traumatized by the experience. So we try to counter that one by taking active steps in sometimes supporting with legal support, getting access to medical care, including healthcare, and also what we call self-defense, which is about educating ourselves, empowering ourselves, fostering that collective bond and unity in the community, which also aids healing. And yeah, we call that also self-defense. So basically, these are the things I'm working on. And personally, I'm a certified psychosocial counselor, and my focus is on Africa centered therapies. Thank you.
So, my turn.
Yes, go ahead.
And so, my name is Joseph Graham. I'm the founder and pastor of Road to Damascus, a faith and wellness ministry. It started as a just a encouraging organization on UNC Charlotte's campus, and it ended up growing beyond my wildest dreams. And it was the motto was academic excellence and spiritual leadership. But what it proved to be was a safe place, especially for African Americans to come in a predominantly white institution, for people that not only value their faith but also are intentional about their social and emotional well-being, their mental and physical health. And so what I've ended up doing over the years is I have what's called a wellness ambassador program. And I partner sometimes with schools, sometimes with healthcare agencies, a lot of times with churches and ministries. And we encourage people not to use religion to hide from their trauma, because oftentimes we will avoid dealing with mental health issues for all kinds of historical reasons, and not deal with and not really be healed. And so I partner with various different groups, organizations, and institutions to address those things. I'm also a professor at UNC Charlotte as well. Last year, in September, we did the 2023 Black Youth Wellness Summit, and it was addressing the fact that that the Black demographic is the fastest growing group battling suicide in the nation. And so we addressed that, and it made such an impact that we've been asked to come to Ghana and partner with some organizations and some institutions connected with the University of Ghana to kind of do the same exact thing, opening up dialogue and speaking about what sometimes is always avoided. And that is dealing with our mental health issues in these faith-based spaces. And that can be a complicated conversation, especially the fact that we're talking about intergenerational trauma. Well, we can't if we're not even willing to be honest about some of the battles and struggles that we've had. That's one of the reasons why each generation can continue to pass on struggles, because we're not directly dealing with the problem itself. I wrote a book called Light Up, a guide for how to balance faith and mental health, which is available on Amazon. But that book is what I use as a blueprint when we do these workshops. But it's also where it came from was my own testament as somebody who had been pastoring over 20 years, been in ministry for quite a long time, but never been to mental health counseling. And whenever the idea came up, I came up with every religious thought, theory, idea to avoid dealing with it. Me following the death of my mother, the death of my father, and then divorce. Eventually, my health was compromised. I was dealing with depression, and it took a colleague to say, listen, if you want to see your girls walk down the aisle, you're going to need to do something, Mr. Graham. And by me going to mental health counseling for the first time, it was one of the single most life-changing decisions I ever made. And it brought me back to a place of mental and physical health that I now share with others.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is really so important that we have these conversations. And I must thank you for the honesty, because this is often a problem that we face while we are advocating or working in our spaces. Then I was at a program yesterday and it was very academic. And I was missing the personal, because I think when we are honest and we can open up about our personal challenges,
Yeah.
then we have a possibility of really changing that which we constantly perpetuate. And yes, I thank you so much for this initiative, for this brave initiative. And definitely, we would love to collaborate with you here in Germany. We need such expertise.
Excellent. I'd be glad to.
I can't hear you.
I can't hear either.
I mean, I love also what you said about being invited to Ghana. You know, that shows that the mission is expanding and we are connected. You know, our Black African family is connected and supporting each other across the globe. And this is also something we need to do, and I'm happy to hear that.
So yeah, it's so important for us to see the common struggles that have been passed down intergenerationally, but also for us to talk about solutions that have helped, because it's not like solutions are isolated. There are practices that I'm sure are taking place in Germany that's going to be meaningful to those in the Americas and the abroad, and likewise, and so it's so important because our roots are our roots, regardless,
Exactly, exactly,
you know.
exactly, exactly, exactly. So, like, how would you, for example, how would you define intergenerational trauma? Because we're talking about it, but often I find we have different interpretations of what that means. And yeah, I would be interested in knowing like how you define intergenerational trauma.
And so, so one of the ways that I would define it is when there has been a traumatic event that have taken place to a people that is not addressed, and there is certain behaviors, thought patterns, perspectives that end up leading to sometimes cultural traditions and practices that keep reinforcing that same trauma, or keeps leaving the door open to repeat that same trauma. And it gets passed down, those traditions, that perspective, those practice, or those thoughts or the mindsets continue to get passed down, many times unintentionally. Because here's the thing that we learn as adults, as we get older, is that the younger generation doesn't they don't follow what you say as much as they follow what you do. And so if it becomes commonplace for us to avoid certain dialogue, or it's common to give false narratives and false explanations for certain behavior, then that's just what the next generation is going to co-sign and do. And that shows up in every area. That's a wide spectrum. That's an intergenerational trauma. We're talking about in a time frame, for example, if you're growing up in a time frame where African men were considered less than white men and were not given the same level of respect in a chauvinistic society, well, who would they take that frustration out on? The only other person that the society says they have a level of leadership over. And so you've got a level of abuse toward Black women, African women, due to the African man or the African American man trying to cope with the fact that he is less than the oppressor. So that's just one example of how it gets passed down and legitimized. And so so I would say when you have a tradition, a mindset, and perspective that is taught more, not just by words, but more so by actions that ends up getting repeated. And then it bleeds into our educational, intellectual mindset, our religious mindset. And so it becomes normalized. And what's sad is the same way that our oppressors have used science and religion to justify inappropriate, inhumane behavior, we end up doing the same thing. So we use scriptures and logic to justify destructive mental and behavioral practices.
Thank you. Sonia, you're muted.
Thanks. Yes, I'm back. I want to apologize for the technical challenges that I'm experiencing here. My internet is going in and out, but nonetheless, let us carry on. How do you think we can encourage more discussions about intergenerational trauma within our Black communities? I'm going to ask this question of Sister, and when Sister's finished, Joseph, you can add to it.
Okay. Now I'm okay. I think to encourage such discussions within our community, it's important to create spaces. You know, spaces that are rooted in empathy, that are rooted in understanding, spaces that are safe enough for us to be honest, you know, and spaces is not necessarily only physical. I would say a space is also could be virtual, like mental health matters. This is an example of such a space. But the
Mhm.
space is also in our families, having that space, having creating that environment that these issues are addressed. It's also, you know, those who are affected, who are feeling this pain, are able to articulate it, you know, and to recognize that it's a collective pain, you know. So it's a collective pain, and it's important to build this culture of sharing pain, of acknowledging also how the past, in our Yoruba tradition, we say it's not linear. The past is connected to the present, it's connected to the future. And
Yes.
sometimes we tend to hide the past. And it's important to really give that space, acknowledge the history of our pain. It's the history of our pain, you know, all those personal family histories that are put in the closet and not talked about. It's very important to address them. I have a friend whose son started displaying symptoms of schizophrenia, and the grandmother had suffered as a child. She had been taken into a home and had been adopted because her mother had this strong mental disease or illness, and she never knew. She never knew. While counseling the mother, she informed me about that, and we tried to work on that. How important it is not to keep such history secret. And she felt if I had told my daughter this, it's going to be so traumatic for her. But it's equally traumatic when the child is displaying symptoms and not able to learn and grow from the resilience and the experience which are in the family. Because when we have the pain and the trauma, it's not just that. There is also resilience. There is also agency. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. So it's, I think, very important to put that in perspective, to acknowledge our stories, it's and know how they manifest today. And we can do this through also in the communities. Sorry. We have like forums, we have storytelling sessions, music, performance art. It's also a powerful way of addressing these issues. And on another level, for example, I often counsel African parents who are resorting to physical beatings of their children. And sometimes they tell me, they say that is our culture. And going back, I have to explain to them how this culture, so called culture, actually was brought through
Yes.
slavery, through colonialism. And
Yes.
now it is internalized and being used on our children.
Yes.
So I think it's very important to create these spaces and to speak, learn to speak about our personal experiences, and not really, as you said, hide in religion. You know, God will take care of it. And as well as when we are in academic spaces, to also have that connect to our personal experience as well. You know, the silence is really not a healing tool. It's important for us to be able to speak out. The silence is not going to save us.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you said, even with you concluding by saying that silence isn't helping. And whenever I think about this subject matter and I think of the word silent, I think about a gun that you can put a silencer on. It may quiet the sound, but it does not lessen the power of the bullet. And that is the truth about the silence that has gone on within our community across the diaspora, is that we say shh, and all that does is cause people to die in isolation. And so when I think about what is the solution, to piggyback off what you said, if I had to use one word, it would be transparency. Transparency, where people are sharing exactly what went on with them. And to your point, when you say we need to bring this transparency in religious spaces, in our educational spaces, in our social political spaces, right? What to me, you pointing out that they call beating their children tradition, when in reality it's something that was birthed in slavery, reminds us that the only way to defeat the impact of systematic racism is to create a systematic healing ecosystem. And a part of that systematic, healthy, healing ecosystem is sharing stories and putting them to music, putting them to lessons in our K-12 spaces, putting them to deeper research and understanding in our collegiate spaces, putting them to messages in our religious spaces. So we take the personal stories and expand it in each field where folks go to learn or to gather information, so that we can normalize hearing these personal truths, so that adults can feel the liberty now to be transparent about theirs, and our young people will grow up in an environment where it is normal to share whatever trauma you're dealing with, so that a person can be healed. We've got to start giving ourselves the liberty to be honest and not see our trials as weakness. Because even that is a part of our oppressive background. We lived in a time period where in oppression, we couldn't say what we were going through. You had to be quiet, you had to shut up, you got to always present yourself as strong. So now, even post slavery, we think it's weak to talk about our challenge. We think it's weak to talk about our personal struggles, and we think it's strong to hide it on the inside. But research has shown the mental, behavioral, and physical damage that it does to the mind and the body when we're not transparent about what we're going through.
Thank you so much, sister. Thank you so much, Pastor Joseph. What I've been hearing, and this came up for me, is storytelling. We're
Yes.
not telling our stories. And I know that we as African descendants came from a long, long history of oral traditions where stories were passed on. But in today's world, where you have a technology that creates separation, that creates a sort of isolation. I mean, I can sit in the house and look at TikTok and not interact with another human being physically. And this is the backdrop against which we're trying to work, bringing communities together, bringing families together to have that open dialogue. One of the other things I also heard, but this came up for me, is judgment. How do you move past the judgments that are created by people around you who will judge you negatively for telling stories of I've been raped, I've been harmed in some way, or my husband abuses me, these are things that bring up shame for a lot of people.
Yes.
When trauma like this happens in certain communities, I mean, I live on an island, and you really don't want your business out there. So sharing stories, telling stories become a thing of, no, I'm not going to do that. And one of the other challenges, even in telling your story to a professional, is the high cost. Who wants to pay $150 for 1 hour just to tell your story to someone? That's a really high cost. And if you live on an island also, where you have maybe just over or a million people, do you want to go to your pastor or your priest and share a story where confidentiality may not be one of their priorities? So
Yeah.
these are the things that
Yeah.
impact trauma because you suffer silently. I personally don't want to go and broadcast to the whole world everything that I've been through because, one, I don't want to appear weak, and I don't want to appear as though I'm always in victim mode. So you suffer. Put effective strategies or practices in place for healing intergenerational trauma, especially where we've been encouraged to be very, very silent. You don't share. How do you address that? What are effective strategies that you can put in place for the healing of intergenerational trauma?
Yeah, thank you so much for addressing that. We all know that, I mean, this is the base of stigma, the shame. And I think shame is one of the most difficult experiences, shame and guilt.
Yeah.
And I would say that when we're sharing, when we're talking of how do we develop a tradition or maintain our tradition of sharing stories, difficult stories, um, I think it's important to first of all know that everyone has their struggles, and there is also power in vulnerability. There is power in vulnerability.
Yes.
And just as Joseph was saying, I think it's important that those of us, our elders, those doing work in the community, that we have to set an example. We have a role to play by openly talking about our own experiences. We have to overcome the shame and walk in courage by sharing our own story. Um, and I think this is all about cultivating a culture of empathy and solidarity. And shame should be met with understanding and not with judgment. And I would say this is why I see also the importance in creating our own educational spaces. Because often you go to school for several years, you finish your primary school, secondary school, you have a master, you have a PhD, but yet we are lacking in such simple things that we are still not in a position to open ourselves authentically, yet we are doing the work. So I think this is something that we have to cultivate. We have to relearn because it's a part of our tradition. Actually, you know, in Sierra Leone there is what they call famble talk, and famble talk means that the space is created. Famble is family, and talk is of course talking. A space is created, and each family member speaks about their pain and the others have to listen. And this continues until everybody has really voiced what happened to you. How is it affecting you? What are you suffering? So originally, this is our tradition. This is where we came from.
Yeah.
And as Joseph said, we lost it along the way. So we have to decolonize attitudes which are no longer serving us, and these are some of the things I think it's important that we start to reactivate in our community work as well.
Yes, I agree. There needs to be, from a personal
Thank
family
you,
level
sister.
to community level, a no shame campaign. That every time someone is transparent, be it an adult or child, that we lift them up and combat when people start calling it shame. That's when we gotta push back with the no shame campaign. Say no, no, this is what
Yeah,
we need. This is what we need, because every time somebody speaks up, there's always going to be somebody that it relates with. And so that's how I think it'll begin to spread and it'll turn its head on. So now it'll become a thing that when people are being honest, they'll be protected instead of ostracized.
yes, yes.
I agree with you both on that. And this brings me to another question that I didn't actually put into the program. But what about parenting? Do you think that if we start to do parenting classes where parents address the inner traumas, that they then become better parents because now they're training their children to be different rather than to just carry on the traditional? I'm not talking about but it's training their children to have that open, honest dialogue so that the generations coming after them are more likely to be open and honest with where they are. And for me, this is very personal because I think that looking back at my own family history where lots of things are kept behind closed doors, you don't know what is happening with your parents, what they have gone through. And therefore, we keep repeating the same patterns of behavior that our parents would have had unconsciously. It is only when you start to do that inner reflection and you start to look at family. So, well, this is a repeat from here. My mother didn't address her trauma, and somehow at a subconscious level, I have picked up that trauma. Therefore, I'm repeating her belief patterns that have passed on to me through what's this word for it? Epigenetics. So therefore, I'm reliving all of her or some of her experiences by making some of the same choices that she would have made in her life. And I know for me personally, these would have been things like relationships, especially where you attract persons who are abusive. And all because there was not that training of your younger generation, not the training of your children of, moving away from situations, healing yourself to the point where you become that parent who can guide your children, not just within a social setting, but also within a spiritual setting, because everything comes back to how we live our lives as spiritual beings. And I heard you say earlier, when you said it, what came up to me was that idea of spiritual bypassing. We wish you wash everything by going to church and singing a few hymns and going home, but the trauma is still there. So I think that training of a parent, working with parents to heal themselves should take precedent in terms of thoughts.
Yeah, regarding the question, I think yes, indeed, it's important and it's beneficial to train children to engage in dialogue, that they learn to talk and to express their feelings, their experiences. That they learn this already from a young age. However, it should be within a safe and supportive environment. And this would help in normalizing this type of conversations, And it could start with something small, just talking about your feelings, learning different ways to articulate the complex feelings we have. Sometimes children don't even know how to express their feelings. They know I'm angry and I'm happy, but exploring that also with children, that they can really express their feelings, is already, I think, a great start. And like I said, leading by example, children learn by observing. And when we openly discuss our own feelings and experiences in a matter which is, of course, adequate for their age, then I think they will model the behavior they see. Um, so we can start with simple things. It doesn't, because the issue of trust and where do I expose myself, it's a valid one. So in order to start, I would say we could start with simply expressing our feelings when we're happy, when we're sad, when we're frustrated, and explaining also how we deal with these situations is a very basic way of being authentic and starting this transparency. You don't have to smile when you're feeling uh, afraid. You don't have to get angry when actually you're feeling vulnerable. um, these are some of the things, like I would suggest with the children, as well as questioning. Building Parents can really assist their children by encouraging questioning. One of the aspects of silencing in the family is you're not even allowed to ask that question. So a question is asked and it straight away comes a reprimand. No, why do you ask that? And this is one thing which is important. Questioning, encouraging our children to ask questions, answering these questions honestly, always in a child, in an age appropriate manner. But these are like small steps which we can take and which are important. And like we said before, this trust is an important issue. We have to learn to protect ourselves. It's not that we're saying never have shame and expose yourself everywhere. We have to learn where to protect ourselves. Where, because the feeling of being careful, of caution, it also has its advantage and its necessity. So it's about also knowing, where do I feel safe? Where is safe? A family should be a safe space. So I think that is the basic thing also in creating that space, knowing, educating ourselves in the community, what is a safe space, what are the regulations of keeping a space safe, and honoring that and educating our children on that. What does it mean to trust? uh, what is expected of me when I am I am being offered such a high level of trust that somebody opens their vulnerability to me. So these are some of the things that I think are important, that we also address.
Thank you, sister. I would like to say, though, that in an ideal situation, being able to talk to your children as a family would be great, but we know that today family is being represented either by a single parent or foster care or some other system. And one of the things that I've given a lot of thought to as a mother is leaving kids, young children, after maternity leave, most of us return at 6 weeks to work. And the child is then thrown into the care of a total stranger through the daycare system. And we do not, well, I'm going to speak for myself. I've left my children with people I did not know, never once thought to interview them to see what their thought patterns were like. How were they going to influence my children? What generational trauma were they going to pass on as caregivers for very young children. I never interviewed them to see where they were in terms of that. And I'm bringing this up because as a parent, I can see how that decision to leave my children with total strangers have impacted them to the point where that nurturing and that bonding at that stage did not take place. And that's why sometimes I say to young women, if you're looking to start a family, consider being a full-time mother for at least the first 5 years of that child's life until that child is ready to go into school. And I am saying this because I have witnessed how the mother being there in the family setting for her children how to shape the children's lifestyle into a place of success, into a place where they are more confident. Um, Not everyone can afford the best daycare center. Not everyone. And family structure for me today is very, very important. But when your children are almost fully grown and they have independent of you, how do you then go back and try to bring them to that place where you can sit down and discuss your traumas and to help them to heal and not to walk in the same path that you have walked in? How do you do that? How do you say to adult children, let's have this conversation, let's talk about intergenerational trauma, let me share with you some of the traumas I experienced throughout my life. And if you're on this planet for as long as I have been, trust me, I've had quite a few traumatic experiences. Some that are I created in my family environment, from my parents, so to speak. How do you bring them into that place of listening when there is so much other information out there for them to follow on the internet?
Well, I think one is that parent who's looking at their child who's now an adult and doing something that oftentimes has been shunned in African diaspora spaces for parents, and that is to admit that some of the practices that I walked in were wrong, and I don't want you to repeat the same mistake. And that is something so hard for a lot of our parents throughout the African diaspora because we've been taught, to always be in this have this authoritative posture as if everything that we have done has been correct. But the humility as a parent to turn to a child who's now an adult and say, there are some things that I've done even while parenting you and while you were rearing you, that I realize now it doesn't work and it doesn't help you. And then begin by being transparent with them, saying, this is what I'm doing now to be more honest with myself and confronting my issues and struggles. And I want you to also be on that journey with me. Because, see, as long as we talk down with someone and if we've arrived and they need to get right, you won't be heard. But when a parent can say, there's some things that I did, but I've now learned better. I've learned strategies. I've learned methods that help me. Let's partner together so that we both can make things better for that parent or grandparent and for that child they're talking to for their children. And so I think that it goes back to that transparency thing. And I think that even children who are adults, when their parent can turn to them and say, there's some things I've done that was wrong, oh, that resonates with them because you don't hear it that often.
totally agree. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. We have to, as parents, we have to. It's strength. It is strength to be able to say, um, we have a past, and we are also healing from wounds. We're
Yes,
also mending our wounds. We are not the all-knowing, all-capable adults, but rather meet on that space of honest interaction and say, and what you said, not talking down. I think that's so important because we do have this. Also, what I say comes from the slavery colonial legacy that is this authority. You know, a parent moved away from being a confidant, from being a guide, from to being an authority that must be respected at all costs, and anything which could kind of undermine this uh, role of an authoritarian figure was a danger. So this is where also it started, that parents started to stop talking, my child. This is my problem. This is where I'm struggling to, talking down, not being, um, not being visible. Wearing a mask. And yes, the mask must come down. We have to pass down this message that we are healing. We all are healing. It's not just your family. It's actually that's the funny thing about it. We all are healing. We all have a journey which we are embarking on, and we need to partner with our children as well. We need to see them on eye level as also being facilitators to our healing journey. And I think we lose this opportunity if we remain in that sense of not really speaking with them. So to your question, I think it's totally okay to to reflect and to plan that honest conversation where one says, I'm struggling in this and that respect. And if you know the reason behind it, to also share, but of course it takes time and it also must be prepared and dealt with in a very nurturing, safe environment. And there we also come to the point of, I think, mental health counseling should actually be normalized.
yes,
In our cultures, it was a normal thing. When I looked at the principles of family talk or the elders' counsel in the family, it was actually mental health counseling.
yes,
It's part of it. There's so many therapeutic uh, uh, um, tools in our traditions, the rituals, but we have to start reclaiming them and also redefining them for today. Some
yes.
things may not be adequate for our contemporary time or the places that we are, but we can redefine them. We don't have to throw away the baby with the bathwater. We can really redefine and construct that which serves us and take all those things which are so powerful in our history, we can take them forward with us.
Thank you, Sister, for that. I totally agree with you. And when you said the word rituals, returning to our tradition and our rituals, I smiled because I read a story recently. Um, I'm always reading, sometimes I don't remember who said it. But I know I read this story recently where this guy was saying he spent some time in Africa. One of the things that he really enjoyed where he was the evening sessions where people sat together, the children, everyone together as a community and discuss the day, how things went for them during the day. I'm going to pull that story up. I'm going to post it in our chat because hearing you say that, the return to rituals, because a lot of our experiences, especially in this part of the hemisphere, has been shaped by colonialism. A lot of our practices, our religious and spiritual practices, have been, I want to say, changed to some extent by colonialism. And I think that returning to some of our African traditions, finding our roots, I think that would help us to heal our trauma, especially coming from a long, long line of storytellers, that oral tradition of telling who we are as a people. I think if we can reclaim that, that we can start on the path of healing from intergenerational trauma, because now we're going to open that dialogue. We're going to discuss how I feel. You will tell me how you feel, and really reshape our understanding. And it is to this end that I want to ask the question: how does spirituality help us to become mentally well, emotionally well, as it relates to intergenerational trauma? Do you think that spirituality has a place in Black mental health matters? Do you think that that will help us to regain our true identity?
That question really is a very enlightening question, because you had just said how colonialism has affected our rituals. And one of the ways that that is so true is the very thought that we can separate spirituality from our mental health is a colonial idea in and of itself. Because we historically as a people know that we don't look at life in pieces and categories, but we look at how things are all connected. One's spirituality is forever connected to one's mentality, and one's mentality is forever connected to one's behavior. And so one of the first things we have to do is realize that it's naive at best to think that a spirituality and our Black mental health is separate in the first place. They are that's a colonial and a Western Eurocentric concept. There is no separation. All life and all manner of existence upon every individual is always connected. One's spirit influences one's mind influences one's behavior, and one's behavior is a reflection of where somebody's spirituality is actually at. And so I think that breaking down the misconception that they can be separated is the first step that has to be made. Because it is so that regardless of a person's religious background, when you bring that to the forefront, now clarity can be born. And you let people know, to think that you're doing anything spiritual and that is separate from your mental health is erroneous and a misjudgment. And we must return back to our connected, harmonious, dare I say, in ancient Egyptian tradition, Ma'at was based upon harmony, right? And so when we talk about harmony, the best example we can give is a symphony by an orchestra. Each instrument is playing the same music, but according to the skill of that particular instrument. So they're not in conflict with each other. They work in unison with one another. And that is the way we must tell people in all spiritual spaces, is that what we believe, what we practice, how we act, all of those, and how we behave should work in unison with each other, not in conflict with one another. And that will open the door for Black mental health conversations that's often been ostracized to realize they always should have been a part of what we claimed we believe.
Yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. Um, in our African worldview, we have to understand that we are not disconnected from spirit.
Exactly.
We have to approach our lives and our healing from this place of wholeness. It's part of who we are. But when we do not know, we no longer know who we are, then we are disconnected, or we feel disconnected from spirit. So when we're talking of spirituality, we're not talking about religious beliefs or certain um, religions. Our connection to the spirit. This is our spirituality. Our connection to ourselves. We are connected. We are interconnected to ourselves, to the nature, and when we know who we are, when we know that, this reminds us always that we're not alone. It also affects the way that we deal with each other. That the love that we cultivate within each other, and how we carry the ancestors of the strengths of our ancestors with us, knowing that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and they also guide us through our healing. It's all connected.
Yeah.
So this is very important. This mind, body, spirit connection is something that we often ignore, but it is there. It is there, and the spiritual connection is actually um, in everything we do. When we are grounded, then we realize it's in everything we do.
Yes.
Thank you,
It's a,
Pastor Joseph,
it's
and
a
thank you. Yeah. Thank you both so much. This has been very enlightening for me, and I know today my takeaway is going to be wholeness, and not just wholeness for myself, but wholeness for all people. Wholeness, returning to that place of wholeness, finding your true north, so to speak, discovering who you really are at your very core, and opening up ourselves to transparent communication with those who are older than us and those who are younger than us, so that we can share that is necessary for us to move forward and make this a world that is a better place for each and every one of us. It is that healing from intergenerational trauma, having discussions, finding wholeness. And today's discussion has been really enlightening for me. I would like to thank everyone who has been on this show virtually watching us. I'd like to thank you for your presence here and your support. Thank you, Sister Oloruntoyin, and thank you, Pastor Joseph. Excellent discussion today. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great to be in
You
this space.
are welcome. You're welcome. You're so welcome.